Hello everyone, this is Vikram and welcome to my channel. In this video, we'll see how to run Python programs. Basically, there are multiple ways using which we can execute or run Python programs. We have script mode, interactive Python shell mode, also known as REPL. And for testing a small piece of Python logic or for doing a small POC, which basically includes small lines of code, we can opt for online compilers that basically compile your source code in the browsers without having Python installed locally in your machine. So without further ado, let's get started. So these are the various topics that will be covered in this video. We'll see how to write our first Python code and save it with .py extension. We'll walk through the Python installation directory to see where exactly the default libraries are getting stored. We'll invoke Python interpreter using the Python as the keyword or entering the Python command line to start writing Python programs. We'll see different ways of running Python files and running Python files in IDLE versus VS Code. And then we'll understand what is REPL, which basically stands for read, evaluate, print and loop. And then finally we'll move on to online interpreters to write Python files and execute in the browser. Running Python programs. Python programs can be run in interactive shell mode or in script mode. So let's try to understand this interactive shell mode first. In interactive shell mode, the terminal is going to be interactive. That means if you type a single command and click on enter, it is going to execute that single command and give you the output. It is as good as executing a certain command in your shell. Let's say that you wanted to get the IP of your machine, so you will do ipconfig and click on enter. So immediately terminal is going to get the output of this command. So even in the interactive shell mode for Python, it is going to behave like that. So once you write a line of Python code and click on enter, it is going to give you the output of that line instead of waiting until you complete your whole Python source code. So how do you invoke this interactive shell mode is by just typing Python in your terminal and clicking on enter. So if you see the screenshot over here, I've just typed Python, and then if you click on enter, so you're going to get this prompt, which is basically 3 arrows, and these 3 arrows indicates that your current mode is Python terminal mode. So you cannot have, or this Python terminal mode cannot detect any commands related to your operating system. It will only detect any commands that are relevant to your Python. So if I just write print hello world, it is typing the print hello, it is showing the hello world because print is a function in case of Python. So now this interactive shell mode is also known as REPL, which basically stands for read, evaluate, print and loop. So first it is going to read the current line, and then it is going to evaluate, and it will just print the output of that line. And you can loop it. That means until and unless you exit from this mode, it is going to behave in the same way. That is, it will read the current line and it will print the output. So what is this REPL all about? REPL is how you interact with the Python interpreter. Basically, Python interpreter will not take your whole program and then give you the output after reading the complete program. Instead, it reads your Python program line by line and it is going to give you the output. So REPL is all about how you interact with the Python interpreter. Unlike running a file containing Python code, basically, which we do in our day-to-day activities. So what we are going to do is we are going to put our complete automation source code or any source code in a file with .py extension, and we are going to give that file to the Python interpreter, which basically reads that file line by line, and it is going to give you the output. But in case of REPL, you just type a command and see the output instantly instead of sending the whole file to the Python interpreter. Now you can use REPL to print out help for methods and objects in Python, and also list out what methods are available and much more. Let's say you wanted to write a single line of a Python code and you wanted to test it. So you don't have to write that line in a Python file and then run that Python file. Instead, you can just invoke the Python interpreter, type that command and see the output instantly. Let's say that I have a is equal to 2, so I'm just assigning a is equal to 2, and these 3 arrows indicates that I'm already in the Python interpreter. And now if I try to use a is giving as 2, but how did a is giving the result as 2? I didn't use any print command to just see the value that a is holding. I didn't use any print command, but here in REPL it works something differently. Instead of using print command to print the output, so you can simply call that variable. That variable value will be printed directly in the terminal. So that is why it is called REPL. So it supports all the Python based syntaxes. So here name is equal to Vikram. Basically name is holding a string. Now if you just write that name and click on enter, it is going to give you the name that actually name variable is holding. Let's say if I'm using x is equal to some DevOps, so this x is of type string which is holding this value DevOps. Now if you just type x and then enter, it is going to print that value of x. Now if you want to see the type of this variable name, so as a human I can see that this is a string, but to the system, so it is not that intelligent enough. Instead, so if you just use type function and then you pass the name of the variable like name x y or something, then it is going to print the type of that variable, whether it is an integer, string, or it can be a float, or real number. It can be anything. Now you can also import some modules, libraries like this in the same REPL itself. Now if you want to get the help section of any function inside that library, let's say time has different functions, right? Sleep is one function, so that will sleep your current execution for some time. Now that sleep function is available in the time library. So in order to get that information, like what that sleep function will do, so you can use help function, and from the time library I'm calling this sleep function to see the help section of that sleep. So there are many ways. Let's say you have the OS, you have the sub process. So sub process is a library. Inside it we have a call function. So now I can use help and sub process dot call to see what does this call function call will actually do to my program. Now in order to exit out of your interactive shell mode, you have to use exit function. So simply writing exit will not work, so it should be an exit function. So there should be open and close brackets, and then you can also use quit function or Ctrl+D to exit off your interactive loop. And in order to clear the complete line, use Ctrl+C. Let's say in the interactive mode I have written some here. Instead of print I just used something like print y. So there is a typo. So instead of deleting line by line, if you want to delete the whole line, simply do Ctrl+C. So now let's see how to invoke this. So basically you can use Windows Spotlight search to basically enter the Python terminal, or else I'm just using the command prompt to open the command prompt like this. Now in order to invoke the Python interpreter or interactive shell mode or REPL, I have to use Python and then click on enter. But before that, let's see the Python version currently installed. So Python hyphen version. So Python 3.10.2 is the current version. Now in order to invoke the Python interpreter, let's just use Python and click on enter. So it is saying Python 3.10. So these are some Git tags. So it is going to detect the architecture also. It is AMD 64 on Windows 32. And now these three arrows indicates that you are in the Python terminal. Let's say dir is a command for Windows. So if I try to run that in the Python interpreter or the Python command line, so it is saying it is able to detect it. But if I just do any command which is related to the Windows or Linux, let's say hostname, so this is going to throw me an error because it is not detected by the Python yet. Now let's see how to use the REPL or Python interpreter. I'm just doing a equal to 1. So in the memory a is equal to 1 is stored. Now if I just do b equal to 2, this is also stored. I'm just doing x is equal to, I'm going to write my name. Now y is equal to, I'm just going to do 10.11, which is basically a float number. Now in order to print y, I can just use y. For x I can just use x. So it is simply printing the x. So if I have to print x using print function, I can also do that, but simply by using the variable name, REPL is going to give you the output directly. So this is one advantage with REPL. Now let's say I wanted to see the type of variable y. So By seeing this value of y, I can know that this is a float. But how do the system know that it is a float? But how do you see that real value of y in any instant of time inside the program? So it is using the type function only. So if I just use type and inside the brackets the name of the variable, so it is saying it is float. Now if I just use type x, so what is x? X basically it is a string. Now I don't have to pass the variable name. I can also do something like this, type, instead I can just do 9.99. so it is of type float. If I simply use 9, it is going to be an integer. So if I just use 9 plus i4, so i4 is not defined, let's say 4i. So even this is not detected, so there must be another way of giving the complex values. So let's try another one. Yeah, so 9 plus 4j, it is a complex number. Now let's say I wanted to import a sleep. So sleep, not sleep, it is a time library. Now inside this time library there can be hundreds of functions. So if I just use directory of time, so I can see all the built-in functions, variables, etc. So if I have to see something, a sleep, right, this is the sleep, so I can just use help inside the time library, a function on a sleep. So now this is going to give you the help section on that sleep. That is, it is a sleep. It takes input in the form of seconds, like sleep 60, sleep 1. So delay execution for given number of seconds. That means your control is going to be blocked for that much amount of that, for those many seconds. So now I'm in the Python interpreter. Now I wanted to exit from this Python interpreter. So if I just do exit, it won't work. So it should be exit like this, or you can use quit function. So now I'm out of my Python interpreter. Now if I just try to use print hello, this won't work because hello is not detected by any internal command by the command line. So this is about the interactive shell mode. Now let's coming to writing Python programs in the script mode. Inside the script mode, what we'll do is we'll create a file with the .py extension, and then we are going to run this file. So in many of the IDEs, you can just use some buttons to directly run this Python file, or you can directly use Python space followed by the name of the file in the terminal to run that Python file. And also sometimes what happens is you have multiple lines of the Python code, but you don't want to save it with some file name called main.py or test.py or any other file name. Instead you wanted to separate, you wanted to supply all these lines of Python code to the Python interpreter directly. So in this case what you can do is, so you can use Python -c. I'm going to tell you what is this C means. Python -c, and within the quotes you have to give the complete Python source code. So let's say I have 5 lines. So each line has to be separated using semicolon like this, and the complete Python script has to be enclosed within the double quotes. Let's say here a is equal to 2, colon b is equal to 4, colon print a plus b. So this whole thing has to be enclosed in the double quotes, and I have to invoke the Python interpreter and supply the arguments like this. So let's open VS Code and see how to do this. Basically, yes, so there are multiple ways of writing these Python files. And before that, let's see, let's type Python and see what are all the results. So there is something Python 3.1064 bit. Basically this is a Python terminal. So if I click on this Python terminal, so this is same thing. So this is already invoking the Python interpreter in the background. But if I have to do it in the another way, I can open the command prompt and then I should type the Python. So this is same, and the previous one, this is also same. Both does the same thing. So that means if I just type Python and see the output, So this is the Python terminal, and there are other things as well, which is IDLE. So let's explore this IDLE first. So if I open the IDLE for the first time, it is going to give me this Python interpreter again. Basically this is also a Python interpreter. Let's try to increase the font a bit. So this is also Python interpreter. So once you click on IDLE, this is also going to give you the interpreter only first. That means I can do a equal to 1 and then print a and then print hello. I can execute all the REPL based command, which is read, evaluate, print and loop. But if I have 10 lines of code, or if I have 100 lines of Python commands to be written like this, so I cannot rely on writing and executing each and every lines, right? So instead I will create a file and put all my commands over there. So how do I create a file from IDLE? So I can just click on this file, click on new file. So this is going to open a new command, new window. Here I can type all my commands. So let's say I wanted to assign a value 1 to A and a value 3 to B, and then I wanted to add them. So don't worry about all these, so we are going to cover in depth. So I'm just writing multiple lines of code, and then I'm just writing print and sum. So what is that sum value? That's it. So now I have to save it. So I can go to file and then click on save, or else you can do Ctrl+S to save it. So I'm going to save it in the desktop with a name. So name I'm just using test, and save as type, it will automatically select python.py. So you don't have to do it, or else you can click on all files and give .py yourself. So this is one more way, or else you can just select the Python files, click on save. So now your Python file is saved. So in order to run it, you can just click on run and run module. So if you run that module, it is going to execute line by line. So in the first line it has assigned A, second line it has assigned B, in the third line it has added both A and B, and in the fourth line it printed. Since print is the only command that will going to print something to the console, so only the last line is printed. Now if I run it again, so you will get the same answer. Also you can use directly F5 to run it, because if you click on run, it is showing F5 as the shortcut for run module. So this is how you create a file called .py, which is a Python file. So from here you can also create multiple files like this, or open an existing one, open a module altogether. You can get a set of recent files. All these options are readily available. Now this is one more way. So other way is to use the VS Code. So I can use Visual Studio Code like this, and now here I can just click on file, new file. So here I can write those lines of code: a equal to 1, b is equal to 4, sum is equal to 2, a plus b, and then a print. By default it is not doing any syntax highlighting, because we didn't say what is the language in which we are writing the source code. That's the reason why your Python is saying that it is a plain text, because you didn't save or selected any language mode. So I can just select the language mode from here, or else I can just save this file to the desktop, and I can just call it as some demo, and in the save as type I can just use search for Python, or else you can also use a .py directly. So you save. So once you save it as Python file, so Python interpreter will be automatically selected. If you have multiple interpreters, you can just click on this and select the existing ones. Here the language type is automatically detected as Python. Now in how many ways I can run it? So in case of VS Code, I can simply run this play button here, which is going to open the terminal, and it is going to execute. See, it has executed and it has printed 5 as the output. So if I click on this drop down, so you can run code, or you can also run Python file. So if I click on Python file, so it is going to get output in the terminal. So basically there are these are the various ways you can use to compile or run your Python file. So how to execute this manually? Let's say that I wanted to run this demo.py file manually without using any of the editors or the IDEs. So what I can do is I can open up any terminal like this. Now basically this is in my desktop, so I'll navigate to my desktop, so where I have a list of my Python program. So if I see, I have this test.py file here. Now how to run this test.py file? So as we said, I can just use Python followed by the name of the file, test.py. So now it is giving me 4 as the answer, because in the test.py file we said a equal to 1 and b equal to 3, and we have added and printed that using the print statement. And now in some operating systems, right, so you'll have both Python 2 and Python 3 installed. So in that case, in order to create a differentiation, what they'll do is, so they'll use Python 2 as the name to invoke the Python 2 interpreter, and Python 3 to invoke the Python 3 interpreter, but they are more or less the same, but we don't have Python 3 installed. A name called Python 3. So it is only the Python which is basically invoking the Python 3 interpreter. Now what is the other way? Let's say I don't want to write a Python file and then invoke give that Python file to the interpreter. So I can do like this, Python hyphen help to see all the available options. There is something known as -c flag, which is basically a command. So program passed in as a string. So instead of you passing the program as a file, you can pass the program as a string. So how do I do that? It is Python -c. So whatever you do, you put it in the double quotes. So I want to do a equal to 1. In the next line, it is b equal to something. But in order to give it inline, so I have to use semicolon, and then b is equal to, let's say, some 7. And then I'm just doing sum is equal to a plus b. And then in the next line, it is print sum. So this is how you give it inline. Then it is going to execute all these commands line by line, and it is going to print the last statement. Like, so it is not only the last statement. Let's say if I have print statement after a equal to 1, let's say print a semicolon, and after assigning b, let's say I want to print that b value as well. We're going to print a, b, and sum of both. So you can, so this is one more way. Now what is this REPL? So we have multiple online compilers. So if you do simple a Google search on online Python interpreters, you are going to get multiple Python interpreters, but I'm going to talk about only this Python online interpreter called REPL. You can code, create, and learn together. That means you can work collaboratively with other developers by using this REPL. So let's understand what is this REPL. So I'm just going to type for repl.com. So this is one of the online Python interpreters. So if I just do online Python interpreters, you can also do online Python compilers. You're going to get multiple online Python interpreters. You can use any of these. So let's say that I'm using this onecompiler.com and Python. So this one compiler, it is not only for Python, so you will have multiple languages support as well. So you have to select Python. So let's say they are already giving Python print hello world. So, or I can just write a equal to 1, and these are automatically adding some commands for you, so you don't have to worry about them. Let's talk about comments in the next section. Then sum is equal to a plus b, print hello world, and after this comma, I'm just going to print this sum. And now to execute this, you can just simply click on this run. So it is saying hello world 3 because a plus b is 3. Let's go back to this REPL. So in order to start working REPL, I can just click on this login button, and then I can choose sign in with anything. So I'm going to use one of my available emails to log in. And now if you see, I can create REPL basically it is read, print, read, evaluate, print and loop. If you have any GitHub repositories, you can connect GitHub directly. Here I'm just clicking on plus to create a REPL of Python REPL. So basically in this case of REPL, a REPL is nothing but a system in which Python is installed. I'll click REPL, Python REPL it, title let's say my demo, and click on creating REPL. So you can also see the CPU, RAM and storage assigned for this particular REPL. And this is the first file that is created, main.py. It is a default one. So you can create folder and another file directly in the browser. And this is the version controlling, that is Git. This is the debugger. These are the various packages. So for now NumPy is the only one that is installed, but you can search for the other package also. Let's say if I just type for pandas, it is going to give me the list of packages. So instead of installing Python in your machine, you can use Replit. So let's go back to the files. In the main.py file, now I can start writing any of the Python related commands. A equal to 1, b equal to 4, c is equal to some 7, and then I'm just trying to print a plus b, let's say minus c, and click on enter. Run. It is saying -2. So this is how you write Python programs in the online Python interpreters. Now let's see the Python installation directory. So if you are on Windows, so Python 3.10 will be installed in the program files with a directory named Python 3.10. Inside it you will see different folders. So you have the python.exe in the root of this directory. So I can simply click on this exes to start the Python interpreter, and there is something known as lib. So this is where the default libraries are all kept, or the modules. So if I just click on anything, so you can see the PyCache. Basically this holds the pyc files. So these are all pre-compiled packages. So whenever you use these packages, so they won't be compiled again. So your execution speed of the Python programs will be faster. Let's see JSON. So inside the JSON also we have PyCache. So if I just open any of the PyCache file, so this is basically this is a bytecode. So you will not see anything. So text editor. So this is basically a bytecode which will be very difficult to understand, and this is the pyc file. So what happens if I just delete this PyCache? So if you delete this PyCache again, this whole library will be compiled and the PyCache will be generated again. And in case if you have modified the content inside this file, in that case also the new PyCache will be generated if Python sees that there is any change in these library files. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.